See. Good evening, everybody. Hello, hello. Hi, Pastor Mike. Hi, everybody. Hi, hello. As Pastor Mike is coming in. Hi, Pastor Mike.
Hey, how are you?
Great, great, great. We are so excited about this. Thank you so much again for saying yes to this invitation to have this critical conversation on mental health. For our community. Thank you. Thank you very much for your obedience.
No, absolutely. Thank you for the invitation. It's a great opportunity to be able to come in and just have a really good, engaging conversation.
Yes, absolutely. So we're gonna give people like time to come in, and I'm very like honored just even by um your ability to be on time because one of the things that we've noticed through our lives, that's why I was checking it with you before. Live and people are ready, so I wanted to make sure that you were ready. Thank you for that, and yeah, let's give time people to come in. And if you are watching the replay, thank you again. So my name is Carlita, and I'm the founder of Chosen Sheep. His Chosen Sheep, which is a movement that actually try to help people share the testimony in order to empower other people who are still walking through what some of us have already overcome, to give them the strength to actually keep hope and to be sure that there is a an after all this. There is an after the struggle. There is an after the trial. There's an after the tribulation that they are walking through. Is all part of the process. And as the Bible says, all things work together for the good of those who believe in God, right? So, in this month of July, we are talking about health is wealth. Is our very much focus. So we've talked about self-care. We've talked about diet and how important it is for us to know what kind of people we are and what we are to be eating or not. And we thought that consecrating 2 weeks on the issue of mental health was critical for our community. So as we I'm going to let you share your testimony and give time for people to come in, and I'm going to use that time to actually share the live with other people in my contact. So if you are joining us, please feel free to share this live because it's going to be extremely important. This conversation, I think, is going to be like deliverance and healing by itself for our community, because a lot of time as Black people, we are taught that we have to be strong, that we just have to take things in. And even based on the story of slavery that we've been through, some of the traumas that we are still trying to process and heal as a community, it does impact the way that we see and do life, generally speaking. So I wanted to invite you, Pastor Mike, because I've seen some of the work that you've done. I've watched some of your lives, and I've watched how you have kind of like talked about this subject. And I really love the approach of like uh, aligning the Bible with culture in terms of like healing. So it's always good to talk to God, but I think it's on a practical way. You also need to have therapy, and therapy is something that is absolutely taboo in our communities, and it's something that I wanted you to share with us on a Bible perspective, but also on a cultural perspective.
Yeah, it's a very relevant and important conversation. And earlier you mentioned this concept and idea of where we come from historically as Black people, and as Black people who have been through a lot. There are really two things that we were, or actually I should say two, at least three major things that we really had to do and were taught, particularly coming out of slavery. And if you think about just the first thing, any Africans that came from Africa and made it over through the transatlantic slave are literally superhuman beings. To have gone through everything
Yeah.
that they went through on those slave ships, land here in America, make it through slavery to now create another generation. The first thing that has always been implanted in us is this idea of mental strength and being able to make it without anyone else's aid or need.
Yeah.
Um, we had to literally fend for ourselves. If you could not fend for yourself, outside of maybe that small group you were in, you literally would not have been able to survive that. And so it's passed down from generation to generation. Be strong by yourself. That's what you can do. You're a mentally strong Black man. You're a mentally strong Black woman. How do you know? You
Mm-hmm.
survived racism. You've done all that. So this is ingrained in our psyche as well. The second thing that helped us through this thing called slavery, though, is also as we started to lose some of, let's say, the spiritual roots that we had from the different religious and spiritual experiences in Africa. We now have embraced this thing called Christianity in a different way. And one of the things that you see passed down from into Black culture is the idea, like, if you have a problem, if you have an issue,
Yeah.
just a little talk with Jesus, makes it right. And so now
Mm-hmm.
church actually turns into our therapy. And to a certain extent, there's one statistic that does speak to the fact that there's something about us in the sense that we are one of the lowest when it comes to suicide. So that lets us know that there's some kind of mental strength there. But on the inside, I think a lot of us are cracking. But because we've always had this myth and this idea that we have to be stronger than anybody else, and then number two, mentally, of course, and then number two, we can just pray depression away. We can pray addiction away. We can pray
Yeah.
mental instability away, because the church has been our source of hope and strength and able to make it through. I think that's why this idea of mental health has not been a strong suit. And there's a couple of things I know we'll get into in the Black community.
Absolutely. That's a great introduction to the subject. I'm sure a lot of your followers are already here, but like for people from His Chosen Sheep who don't know you, can you talk about a little bit of your background and just introduce yourself?
Yeah, no. So I'm a pastor, by profession, not bivocational in the sense that I kind of do pastoring on the side and work another career somewhere else. But I went to school, seminary trained. So as a pastor, went through Andrews University, got my master's degree, bachelor's degree. But I always was very interested in psychology. And so I'm double majored in psychology, emphasis on family counseling. But because I was going to have to wait an extra semester to graduate, I just dropped it and turned it to a minor. So I missed a few of those classes. But then going into into grad school, I also went on the track, for, again, emphasis on counseling. Have a lot of, several different certifications as far as crucial conversations. Almost finished with my Gottman certification, so I'll be a Gottman certified,
Oh, nice.
therapist. Also work on when I say on the side, because I think it's all a part of what I do for Frisco Counseling and Wellness, and that's where I see clients there distance. And so a lot of what I do really is around not just pastoring, not just preaching, but really working with individuals one-on-one, and also working a lot with couples to help them get to where they need to be as an individual or as a couple. Now, my church
Okay.
is predominantly African American, so one of the things that I am finding is 98% of the people I counsel are people of color.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah. The difference is, though, there's a little bit of familiarity with that. And whether they're in my congregation, they see me online preach. And so there is that kind of familiarity. So they're not walking into this counseling session like, who is this guy? Which gives me a little bit of an advantage than just a counselor. You're going to see their picture up on a website and then hope to go follow them. So that's a lot of where my background is and where my passion is, because every time a Black family, a Black individual walks through that door, I'm like, yes, you guys are beating the statistic by investing
Yeah.
really heavily in yourself.
Yeah. And I think it's one of the most, I think for me, one of the first step to healing is realizing that we need to invest in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We need to commit to our own healing because it's not going to come anywhere else but from us making the choice to heal.
Right. Right. No, I think that's a big thing. And so many times what I think we've done as a group of people is, instead of taking the time to truly heal, we're used to getting that scar, putting a Band-Aid on it and keep on going, because we almost feel like we don't have time to heal. I don't have time to invest in me. I think also the financials sometimes play into it a little bit. You know, when you have,
Yes.
Black people who are living in poverty disproportionate to other ethnicities, and they say, okay, groceries or a counselor? I'm going with the groceries, right? And so those are the kind of things that we need to change because, man, therapy, counseling can literally save somebody's life. It really can.
I think if I didn't had therapy, I wouldn't have the moment of joining or be like coming back to Jesus, because I
Right.
think accepting therapy as a first step has helped me see myself the right way, and realize that I needed help and I needed more than whatever I had all the way through here. So for you, for example, what are the most common um, underlying issue that you see coming from our community that we don't address?
Um, honestly, there are what we experience sometimes as people, people come, not sometimes, all the time, is we're constantly being faced with macro and microaggressions of racism, which literally lead to us being stressed, which literally lead to us lowering our immune systems. Hence the reason when it comes to most of the categories of disease and death, African Americans are predominantly higher than our white brothers and sisters because of these different stressors. Now, there are stresses that every ethnicity will have to deal with, right? Like every ethnicity
Mm-hmm.
has a different thing. Will I say, do I believe that blacks have the hardest? Yes, I do. I just believe historically that is the case, and also present wise. The difference is though, we don't really deal with that. And so what I think I run into, and I think is very hard in our community, what I see a lot is this stressful life that we're living and not really having a specific and intentional plan on how to manage and deal with this stress. We're all going to have stress. Black people have a disproportionate, I believe, to other ethnicities. But I really find that when I come in and I'm talking to people, it stresses in so many different areas of their life that I'm paying attention to. And I'm like, man, you're just kind of living through this. You're not really dealing with it. You're not really attacking it. You have no plan for it. And that stress now spills over into your health physically. It spills over into the way that you handle relationships. It spills over into how you might be on your job. And so all of this, I think stress to me is like the number one thing as a killing our community, literally.
No, like literally killing. And as you're speaking, I'm literally hearing the correlation between mental health and learning how to face and deal with stress versus just like walking through it, and the state of getting into wholeness. Like, can you as a pastor, like, and as a counselor, talk about how important it is for us to be healed and whole to get the abundant life that we were promised by Christ? And the other thing that we want to talk about is like, just how do we know what are the practical steps, because I want people to live this life or to live the replay, whatever they're watching, with like practical steps to detect uh you know the stress levels, and to detect where they have reached their limits, and like really detecting the moment where they need to stop and be like, I need help.
Yeah, I think here's a couple practical steps. Let's start from that point too, and then go
Yeah,
backwards. I think when
absolutely.
it comes to this idea of stress, and this is also very individual. There are some general things you can look for, but it's also very individual. If you find yourself getting angry, agitated, or bothered over things that normally don't, or in a general sense, should not bother you, um, that's a sign that you're probably, more stressed out. Some physical signs could be for, some ladies, hair loss, not being able to sleep properly, your diet being thrown off, not having time to sit down, and eat, snapping at people, being late for meetings. I think another sign sometimes they've said of a stressful life where things are just piling up on you. If you've got like all these voicemail messages that you've never checked, that's a sign that you're probably a little stressed because you don't want to go and look at those and actually take the time to go through them. I think disorder. when your life is out of order, meaning you're just kind of letting the day happen and you're kind of responding and reacting as opposed to being proactive, that's a sign of stress. Because when you're stressed, you don't have time to plan. You're just kind of dealing with everything one at a time as it comes. So those are just some very practical things to kind of, to look for. Does your mind race? Can you actually sit down and pay attention to one thing, or are you on to the next and on to the next and on to the next? All those things are a sign of stress. Yeah.
Not to cut you, what's the difference at this point between stress and depression?
Um, you know, that's good. So depression, would be more like this. So the idea of anxiety is I'm concerned about the future. Depression is I'm kind of sunk and sitting here, dealing with some of the things, of my past, and I'm worried about how I'm going to handle something, right? So depression can lead to stress. That's the thing that's very interesting. And stress can lead to depression. And let me give a practical example of that. If I'm stressed out about my job and I don't put a plan in place to try and deal with it, I can then move into a state of depression because I'm like, man, my job's not going to change. I'm not going to be able to change. And so now I just kind of sit and I'm just in my worry. I'm in my concern. So one can definitely lead to the other. And I think they both can intermix. I think people who are stressed can easily be depressed, and people who are depressed usually have some stress. So they both really, really do go together.
Okay, got that. So just want to let
Yeah.
you continue. Sorry, I just want to make sure, because a
No,
lot of the
yeah.
signs that you were listing when it comes to stress and anxiety, I feel like kind of look like the same when it comes to like depression, where we just feel like it feels like procrastination, but what we really are is like we just don't want to do anything anymore, and we just deal with things as they come, or sometimes we just refuse to deal with it and just be like in that part where we just like ignore stuff. So I just wanted to know, like, what is the difference? Because for somebody who herself had to go to therapy to understand different things in life, and even remember some of the traumas that I've had when I was younger, like I never had the awareness that I was depressed, because I was just even being successful as what I was doing, and then I realized later with help that I was being functional in dysfunction.
Yeah, so I think here's a good way for me to explain that. So I was with a client sometime last year, I think it was, and I was sitting there talking to her because she called in and called into the office, and he wanted to set an appointment. And so we sat down and said, okay, what seems to be the issue? And she started to explain how the other day she had spent, this is a Caucasian lady, how she had spent the day just sleeping, and she was just sleeping the day away. And she said, I think I'm depressed, because she just slept all day. And a lot of people associate sleep with depression. So I asked her this question. I said, do you think there's something wrong with sleeping? And she said, well, yeah, I should have been up, doing my thing. I said, no, it's actually okay for you to sit down and sleep for a day. The sign that you're going to be depressed is when you sleep for a day, you don't get up, do anything, and that's on Monday. Then Tuesday comes and you want to do the same thing.
Okay.
Wednesday comes and you want to do the same thing. See, you're losing your motivation. But sometimes we're stressed that we need to sleep the whole day. And that's fine, because I take a day. It starts to be depression is when that thing that should have been a day now begins to become the regular part of your life. Nothing wrong with being sad and sitting down and being contemplative and not wanting to move or do anything. But if that is the course of your life for 2 weeks, or the course of your life for 4 consecutive days, okay, something's a little off here. There's one thing for me to experience these moments, because we all need to take moments. But when those moments turn into patterns, those moments turn into habits, those moments now turn into the regular way that I'm doing my life, and it's of me not being motivated, not wanting to get up, always in my thoughts, speaking negatively, when that becomes now my pattern and my habits, now it's a sign like, okay, I might be depressed. But there's nothing wrong with sleeping for a day if you need that. Some of us need to actually do that. And that's one of the reasons I love the Sabbath, right? Because
Absolutely.
look, I'm just going to sleep sometimes. I need to just take my day into rest. But if I'm doing that on Saturday, on Sunday, on Monday and Tuesday, nah, that's when it
Yeah,
really is depression.
absolutely. So going back to like some of the practical steps that you listed, like when it comes to like acknowledging that need help,
Actually, I
the
lost you for a
second
second. If
step.
you yeah. Guys still reconnecting.
Hello?
Oh, sorry, just a little technical difficult. There we go. I got you back now.
Yes, absolutely. So some of the steps actually that you listed when it comes to like, practical steps of knowing that, okay, we are going through anxiety and we need help. Like when do we get to that point where we are in community and we realize that we're snapping at people, that our mails are not being answered like we usually do, or we just get overwhelmed by every little detail and all those things. Like, how do we go from there and, being this strong woman? And even sometimes, like, I think at that point, like, we get the a guilt coming in, like that part where we feel like, okay, I'm not doing the things the way I usually do it, and then I start feeling guilty about not being fully myself, and it's like a cycle. And where do we go from there to getting to the point where we start being that strong black girl, and or even sometimes the black angry girl because of everything that we're dealing with, to getting healed?
Yeah, so there's a couple things here. There's that rap song "Don't Push Me," because I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. It's like a jungle. Sometimes it makes me wonder how I keep from going under. And so what I think is important is that our pace of life leaves what I like to call margin for life. In other words, if I know my life can fit this, right?
Mm-hmm.
What we tend to do is in between that space, I get as close to an edge as possible and fill my life with a whole lot of stuff. Therefore, when something is added, a macroaggression or a stressful thing, it pushes me over the edge. And a lot of times we wait for that. What we need to learn to do is create this margin in our lives where if my capacity is here, I need to live here so that when things start to happen, I have enough space to fill it with not me losing my mind and going to the edge. So what I like to tell
Mm-hmm.
people, if your space is here and you're starting to experience stress, anxiety, and depression here, don't wait till you get to the edge to sit down and talk to somebody. Give yourself that margin to then say, okay, I know I've got some space here, but I'm starting to feel this early. Before it pushes me closer, let me go talk to somebody now. So, for example, that client I just told you about,
Yeah.
as much as
Mm-hmm.
I was able to tell her that, hey, this isn't depression, it was good to get her on that front end, because it
Mm-hmm.
would have been one thing if she had waited 3 more months and that became her habit and that became her pattern. So what I like
Mm-hmm.
to tell people, which is why I think therapy is so important, and you can find so many, and not all of them are great. And I'm not saying you need to go see your therapist for 8 times in a row, but it's really good to be able to say, look, I'm feeling this stuff now, and it's a little more consistent than I'm used to. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
to the edge yet. Let me go talk to somebody now, because then they can give me preventative measures as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to restorative measures. And so a lot of us go to therapy when everything has hit the fan, when we've gone over the edge and our life is completely fallen apart, as opposed to when you start to see the little signs, let me go talk to somebody early on. So I like for us to look at our light and some of those practical tips that we gave. When we're driving our cars, your gas light comes on to tell you before you're empty. And it actually
Oh,
gives you
that's
margin
good.
before you're empty.
Mm-hmm.
But what some of us do is they say, okay, I know the light's on, but I'm going to keep driving because I know I can. But
Mm-hmm.
really, what we should be doing, even with your vehicle, is when the light comes on, that's when you should fill up. So each of us have our own individual lights that let us know, pull over, and get filled up again. And when that light comes on, and we have to identify what those are in our lives, when that light comes on, pull over, have something pour into us, and then get back on the road.
Wow, that's really good. That's absolutely good. And I see you guys in the comment. I enjoying the conversation. I see the hearts coming up. Do not hesitate to, if you have any question, because this is a conversation, right? So though we are here to gain some wisdom and take notes on, practical steps to get out of the situation that we are in, we also here to take advantage of Pastor Michael being available, Pastor Kelly being available, and being able to take, ask some questions like, what are you guys going through right now? How has the whole
Yep.
COVID situation impacted your life when it comes to like dealing with stress? For me, for example, I know that I had to come to the awareness that I was getting stressed because I was overeating. And I had to realize that, okay, this is not normal. I usually don't eat this much. What's going on? And I'm eating things that I know I should not be eating because it's not good for my health. So, there has to be a level of transparency with ourselves where we have to realize that, okay, something is going on and I'm not myself. That's the number one thing. The second thing that I've also noticed is that when you talk about like us knowing that, okay, we are getting to the edge and we know our margin, that implies that we know who we are and we know we have taken time to kind of like learn us as individuals, which in our community, again, is not something that is really promoted, like in terms of like self-awareness, self-development. And it's a whole like culture shift that we have to go through, and we have like a whole mindset to rebuild for us as people, as Black people, to be okay with those literal phases of like evolution for our community. So you talked about that client, but I also want to talk about the client that is successful, that think that they don't need help, and everything crashes, and now they are in your office.
Yeah, usually people, we have such a backwards view of success. The person who thinks they're successful, anytime I say, what does success look like? If I ask someone a question, what does success look like? The first thing they start to speak to is a position. It's a
Mm-hmm.
job, it's a status, or, something like that. And that's the unfortunate part about how we have labeled success. Success is always tied to what we do. And unfortunately, not enough of it is tied to who we are as people. And so what happens is when things start crashing down, usually when something crashes, it reveals the inner workings of what you've built up and what you've established. So if I lose my job, if I lose everything, uh, things are happening all around my life. It's at that moment where I'm able to really see, okay, well, who are you really, based on how you're able to go ahead and handle that. So when that person comes into my office, we don't talk about how to repair what they've lost. We actually repair what they probably never had, and give them what they've
Hmm.
never had, which is usually character, inner workings, and that kind of introspection and look at who am I as a person. Because
Mm-hmm.
and one of the exercises I think is always great for people to do is plan your funeral. And when I say plan it, not just the order of service, but I want you to write out, what do you want people to say about you at your funeral?
Oh,
Like
that's good.
when they're talking, what do you want them to say? Now, if you want, like for my funeral, if I want people to say he was a great pastor, he was a great, this, and always describe my work, well, then I'll just pour more energy into my work. But if I
Mm-hmm.
want people to remember the kind of father I was, the kind of individual I was, that I walked with integrity, that character was important, that I did self actualize and did self reflect, then I need to pour my life, energy, and work into those areas as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so do that. And if you find what you want people to say at your funeral is not what your life pattern, habits, strategy reflects, then you need to readjust that.
Awesome. Guys, how you doing right now? Everybody's okay? Like, how you enjoying the conversation? If you are watching the replay, thank you so much. Thank you, Pastor Kelly, again for being here. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to post them in the comments, or even like hit the question mark and just like submit your question. Right now, I'm just going through my own life right now, sharing testimonies. But like, and one of the thing that I want you to talk about is some of the myths that are attached to therapy in the Black community, and how we can break those myths down.
Yeah, I think one myth applies to the Black community and particularly sometimes a lot of different people. Going to therapy or counseling doesn't mean you're crazy. Um, Therapy is not simply for crazy people. I tell people all the time, I am not a psychiatrist. Like, I don't deal with schizophrenia and sociopaths and different things like that. Like, I don't deal with that. So a lot of people think that going to a counselor or a pastor or even in some cases a therapist means that you're crazy. No. Now, are there people, and I don't like to use the word crazy at all, but are there
Mm-hmm.
people that have mental instabilities? Absolutely. That literally have chemical imbalances, that have these multiple personality disorders, and
Mm-hmm.
are able to lie without remorse. There are those kinds of people. You sitting down with someone doesn't equal you being that kind of person.
My
Um,
God.
what I think is so interesting is while we don't though believe, and here's the funny thing about that myth, we think we're crazy because we sit down and talk to somebody. Let something happen, you're going to call your homegirl, you're going to call your homeboy, and you're going to talk to them about what's happened. The only
Mm-hmm.
difference is they're just not equipped to handle some of the things that you probably are going to share. Not only are they not equipped, but they're also not biased. They're also a bias. So they might lean in a certain direction because they're more concerned about their friendship than they are you. When
Mm-hmm.
somebody comes into my office, I don't care what you think about me, in the sense that I'll tiptoe around something to say the right
Mm-hmm.
thing as to not offend you. Now, I
Mm-hmm.
want to help you, so of course I'm going to say it that way. But I'm okay with saying something that might offend you if it means it will help you, because I'm not going to try and have dinner with you tomorrow. But your
Wow,
friend
that's
that you've
good.
been talking with, they're like, man, I really might not be able to say it because we got to eat tomorrow. So my point, to people with that, the myth is, man, talking to someone makes me think I'm weak. Well, you talk to friends all the time, except now talking to a counselor is an unbiased person and is a person who is equipped to handle your thing. Going to
Mm-hmm.
another myth, going to sit down to talk to someone does not mean you're weak. It actually means that you are strong, because a strong person recognizes when they need help. So
Mm-hmm.
that's another myth I think that needs to be debunked as well. It's too expensive. No, it's not. They have sliding scales for counselors. I know myself. I allow people to get on a sliding scale. The reason why we do pay, and we do, you have to pay something, is the statistics show that people are more invested and will do more of the work outside the office when they put some money behind it, because
Absolutely.
you can't treat it like the gym. Like, some people have a gym membership and they pay for it every month but never go.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a little different, because the only time you're paying is when you do go. And if you know you want to continue to get the help, the pay reminds you, hey, I've invested in myself, and so I need to follow through. So I think those are just a few of the myths that we do have when it comes to counseling that should be easily debunked.
So another thing that I want to talk about is I'll say, how do you um recover for some of the trauma as a young person, let's say, who has been through um uh okay, let me give a practical example. For example, um I just learned today that I've lost one of my cousin, and I'm thinking about the mother, my aunt, right? So, and I'm thinking about, how do you as a mother recover from seeing one of your son go before you? Like, how do we recover from death? Because sometimes death is losing a person, but sometimes death is also losing a situation, or losing an opportunity, or thinking that we've lost something that could have built us in a stronger way. So I want to talk about, like, how we recover from death, or from the loss of something that we really cared about, because that's another thing that we don't do well in this community. We just like keep things inside and we don't talk about it. And when you are in a relationship, when is it a good time to talk about some of the things that you've been through as a young person? Either you've been molested, either you've been, some people were not molested physically, but they've been through uh, mental trauma, for example. So when is it a good time to talk about those things? So those are my two questions. Because
Yes.
you guys are not asking questions, so I'm just taking this as a therapy for myself.
No. there's a lot. The first thing I think is important that when we talk about grief and loss, sometimes it's always only associated with death. But research has really shown that loss doesn't just include death, and all of the same principles really are able to apply. So, for example, one of the things we never look at as a loss that people have to deal with is when that senior citizen now gets to a place where they can no longer drive. Right? They've lost something because they've lost their ability to be independent. They've lost, their ability to go when they want to go. So they have lost a little bit of freedom there. That's a loss. Some people just look at a job loss as, oh, you lost money, but no, there's something that really happens. And honestly, I don't really have the time to go through all of them because it's a really, actually I just went and did a certification in trauma, in grief and loss and recovery. So one of the things though, I think the first one is you have to accept, your loss. Acceptance is not being glad that the loss happened, but it just comes to terms with the reality. So, I get it. Like, okay, this is no longer in my life. This person is no longer in my life. And I've accepted that. Like, I've come to terms with that. This actually, is a reality. The second thing that you have to do is I think we have to live, our grief, right? We have to take some time to live it. Like some people say, oh, hurry up and get over it. Like, no, it's okay to live in that for a second. Now, remember when we told that last client, you can sleep for a day or two, right?
Yes.
Like, that's okay. Don't do it for a week. So what we have to do is let people know that it's okay to be able to live your grief. Here's just a quote I'd love to read, just a couple of quotes. We may not be able to change reality, but we can help to move some of the pain and start the process of turning the upside down world right side up. Another part, we must embrace pain and burn it as fuel for our journey. That's one of my favorite ones. Taking this pain and this loss and saying, this is fuel for my journey, because this loss and this trauma that you've experienced, as much as we hate it, it's part of the journey now. It's a part of me. And so now, instead of that being something that stops my journey, I'm going to turn it into fuel for my journey. That trauma, that's what I do. So now I kind of reevaluate what happened in my life. And then here's another one. Grief is as natural a part of life as is being born, growing, and dying. And so when you kind of can say to yourself, like, man, this thing that's happened to me is very natural, it's taking place, and you're like, man, I can push through and move through that. And then the third thing, as a pastor, I like to tell people to go deeper into your spirituality. Whatever that looks like. For me, it's a Christian. It's Jesus Christ. I believe he is Lord. Some of you have a different look at that. And so what I think you really need to do is go into this spiritual place where you're reconnecting with whatever your spiritual self is. You need to remind yourself that you are worthy of love. That you can forgive yourself for whatever kind of thing that might be happening. I mean, obviously, depending on what the trauma is, you can forgive the person. And there are times when you can even say thank you. And that's why that spiritual thing lets you do that. So for me, when I've gone through grief, when I've gone through loss and challenges, I actually look at God and I said, you know what? Thank you for trusting me with this grief. Thank you for trusting me with this trauma. I know you didn't want it to happen to me, but the only reason you allowed it to happen is because you know I could handle it. And so thanks, let's move forward. So those are, I think, just a few things to really kind of deal with your trauma and different griefs that you've experienced in life.
Oh, that's very good. That's very good. Oh, we have a couple of questions. Like, is counseling only good for when you are going through? Or is there such a thing as just going to the counseling to check in for maintenance, maybe as Black people, due to micro we've always going through?
Yeah, so here's the thing that's huge, and I tell this to couples. I do pre-engagement counseling. I try not to do premarital. I like to do pre-engagement. Just want to say that to y'all out there. Pre-engagement, do not use the engagement period to gauge whether or not you should be with the person. Like, that's not. The moment you say, when they get on their knee and say, will you marry me? And they put their ring on your finger, technically you should be at a place where you could get married the next day. The engagement period should only be for planning your wedding. I just want to put that in there. Because usually people, they try and come to me with premarital counseling and they already have a date set. So I'm like, well, then what's the point? Your mind's already made up. But pre-engagement is good because then you can determine whether or not
Mm-hmm.
you do want to be engaged, whether or not I do want to be married, because
Mm-hmm.
I've learned a lot of stuff through the pre-engagement. But with all that said, here's what I tell the couples after we're done and I do the wedding. I let them know, hey, you don't change your oil only when the engine stops working. You actually change your oil every 3,000 miles to
Mm-hmm.
ensure that your car is running smoothly. So I
Mm-hmm.
said, y'all need to be checking in with me once a quarter. Like once every 3,000 miles, you change your oil. Once every 3 months, y'all need to sit down and talk to me. I think it's the same thing for us as individuals if we're single as well. Every three
Mm-hmm.
months, I want to check in with somebody. Yo, am I right? This is what's been happening in my life. This is what I've been doing. I haven't reached my goals. I have reached some of my goals.
Absolutely.
What's happening with me? What do you think? And then they're able to talk you through it. Every 3,000 miles, change your oil. Every 3 months, get at least one session in with somebody. At least.
At least, at least. That's really good to know that you have to check in regularly. So I have another question, question, and at the same time, like an affirmation. She said, "I've been healed, but I'm still on that journey. Um, but there are other girls who are still battling with feelings and not being enough. How does one help them?"
Yeah, so, obviously, I don't know how soon or what happened, to hear about why you got to that place where you didn't feel it was enough. Was it an incident that happened, relationship, the way you were raised with your parents, whatever was poured into you? So I have to answer this question a little more generally. But the thing that I think you need to do to understand that you are enough is I want you to really sit down and I want you to think about the things, not only that you think about you, the positive things that you think about you, but I want you to remember some of the positive things that other people have said about you. Now, this doesn't mean that what they say about you defines you, but what you'll start to see is that this negative stuff that we say about ourselves, now I want you to do the same thing with this list of negativity. And then
Mm-hmm.
here's what sometimes happens. We find that, man, all of these things I say about myself negatively, man, I seem to be the only one that thinks that about me. Nobody else, my inner circle doesn't really think that. The people who are
Mm-hmm.
closest to me, who know me well, don't think that. So, man, I wonder if I'm, number one, being too hard on myself. Number two, do I have a misconstrued view of who I am? And where does that kind of thing come from? Does it come from this perfectionist attitude that if you haven't reached this standard, that now you think that you're a complete and utter failure? The other thing I think is important too, talk positive to yourself out loud. Not
Mm-hmm.
just, yeah, I know technically I'm a good person. No, I want you to talk positively about yourself and be specific. My skin is beautiful. My nose is beautiful. I am kind to people. I show up on time. I read a lot of different books. I'm valued at my job. My children love me. Say these things out loud, and then you'll start to come to the realization that, wait a second, there's a lot of good things about me, and there's
Mm-hmm.
not these many bad things about me, and everyone has good and bad.
Yeah.
And even sometimes what you'll find is even if you have 6 areas in your life that you don't like, those could be so minor, but there could be one area that is bigger than all. So look at it like a bank. If I make 6 deposits of 5 cents, at the end of the day, I'm getting 30 cents because that's 6 deposits, right?
That's a
That's
good
only 30 cents.
example.
It's a lot, but it seems like I keep going back to the bank and I keep making this deposit. But then when I take one
That's
check for
good.
$10,000, that
Mm-hmm.
one check, even though it's one deposit, outweighs all the rest. So even if you're
Mm-hmm.
finding these 6 negative things about yourself, but you find that, man, I'm a person of integrity, that
Yeah.
one thing completely outweighs the fact that, yeah, sometimes you don't show up on time, or yeah, sometimes you might not follow through, but man, I'm a person of integrity. And
Mm-hmm.
so I really want to have you look at that one thing that could override the other 6. And don't try and make it this even ratio.
That's really really good. Like I like the analogy of like the bank deposit, because I think one of the things that we don't do enough, and one of my friends had to actually bring me into that perspective, and I think she's online, Shaniqua, if you're here, shout out, is um, celebrating your wins. She literally had me list the things that I do. As an achiever, I do a lot during the day. But the thing is, like, because it's so normal to me, I don't always realize the amount of things that I get done during a day. So she really had me sit down and list everything, including all the details up to, oh, I call this person, I talk to this person. Like, we don't do that because we were just built to be achievers. Like, I come from Africa, and if you are groomed into a culture of having to be, I won't say even excellent, because now I know the difference between perfect and excellent, but we are groomed to be 2 times or 3 times better than other races. So that pushes us into like such a performance mode that we don't even know anymore, um, if we're doing this to please people or if we're doing this because this is really what we want to do. So having like time to sit down with ourselves and just like some people say counting our blessings, but like also like counting the things that we've done, just like you said, and just be like, I've done this, and just like the words of affirmation, I think are so important to just us coming into the awareness that we are enough. Like, we are enough. So I just really want to reinforce that. That's an amazing perspective. And I see you guys here in the comment going in, and amazing. Thank you guys for even just tuning in. And there is one that said, and y'all need to be friends until these people, if they stink. I think what she meant, maybe you don't need to be friends with people who don't protect you, or people who stink with you at all costs. Because men are attracted to your sense and they know the difference between cover up and the real deal.
Mm.
So I'm not sure what exactly was the sentence behind it, but I guess like it brings us to the place of talking about authenticity and having the right circle. That's what I can think about, and how that kind of like plays a role into our wellness and our like mental wellness as well.
Definitely. One thing that one of my friends, Pastor Marquise John, says is Jesus cannot save the person you pretend to be. He can only save the
Mm-mm.
person that you are. And that's where we need to be able to embrace the authenticity of our flaws. One of the things that the Bible says that I love is a just man falls 7 times. I mean, think about that. A just man, a good man, a good person doesn't not fall. But a good person is someone who does fall and knows how to get back up again, has surrounded themselves with people to help them get back up. And then what makes that person good is they also recognize that these are the things that have contributed to my fall. So
Mm-hmm.
let me not go down those same areas again. But we need to be authentic with ourselves because we're dark and we've got horrible parts of us. The people that are bad people are the ones that run right past the darkness and act as if it doesn't exist and never address it and then make excuses for it when it's brought to their attention. That's a
Mm-hmm.
that's a bad person. A bad person is not someone who makes poor decisions. A bad person is not someone who does bad things. A bad person is someone who does bad things and does not have accountability for those things, doesn't look within
Mm-hmm.
themselves for those things, and doesn't put a plan in place to change those things. But good people can sometimes do bad things, but they want to correct it, they look at it, they figure out why they
Yeah.
did it, and they want to put something in place so they don't do it anymore.
That's absolutely great. That's absolutely great. I don't know if you had more to say about like, every subject. If not, I will let you guys go. But like, I think we've touched on multiple points today that can be helpful. I'm just gonna try to summarize them very quickly. And if I miss anything, please feel free to jump in. We talked about how, going to talk the first of all, there is a difference between a therapist and a counselor and psychiatric, right?
Yeah,
And
psychiatrists, yeah. They're like they're
psychiatric,
prescribing medicine and stuff.
exactly. And the fact that you go to a counselor doesn't mean that, or you have therapy doesn't mean that you are crazy, that you are weak, and that in order to come to your level of fullness and wholeness, you need healing, and sometimes healing comes with therapy. And then trauma is only healed once you start addressing some of the latent issues or underlying issues that you might not see because they are in your blind spot. But when you talk to somebody, the person can help you, first of all, identify those and address them correctly. When it comes to grief, grief is not only when somebody, that is not always like related to um, somebody missing or somebody not no longer being here. It can be grieving a situation, grieving a person, but that's still here, but because of the relationship that you have has changed. And then we talked about accountability and having integrity in our character in order to just being honest with ourselves, acknowledge where we are in order to like being able to get the help that we need to get to the next level. Is that did I summarize
Oh yeah,
everything
I mean, my
correctly?
goodness, it looks like you just right in there.
Okay, so guys, thank you so much for joining. I'm gonna leave the last word to Dr. I almost said doctor, like
No, no,
uh,
not that,
Pastor
not that.
Pastor Kelly. Thank you again, honestly, for honoring our invitation and saying yes, because I think this live has probably helped some people to even just realize where they were and acknowledge that maybe they need therapy. If so, we thank you so much for just like coming to that level of integrity and honesty with yourself, and then thank you again for just being available.
No, absolutely. And, we want to be here to help. This month, we're doing a series at my church called The Royal Family. It's on
Oh.
marriage and the issues that marriage in the marriages within the Black community specifically. So if you're in a relationship, whether you're dating or married, we want to help you build a sound house. Palace
Mm-hmm.
that you can live in as a couple. If anyone does want to go a little further and would like some extra help, please just go to my Instagram page and you can see
Yeah.
the link there for Frisco Counseling and Wellness. Just go on that website, book a session, and I promise you it will help you.
You'll
And
change
because
your life.
everybody needs a little help. Everybody needs a little help. I see a therapist as well because it just helps me. So do that. I thank you for the opportunity, and hopefully we'll do something again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you guys. And please follow Pastor Mike Kelly. Go into the handle, just start following him. And I think it's great that you say that you also see a therapist, because I think people always like make the confusion between having a therapist and having a coach. Those are two different things, right?
They
So
are. They are. Yes, they are.
we want to make sure that we have the right help. So though you have a mentor, a coach, or whoever, it's always good to have a therapist.
Yeah.
So thank you again, guys. It's Friday. I hope you have plans for this evening and that your weekend is going to be amazing, because one of the things that Pastor Kelly talked about today is the Sabbath. So take time to rest, and it's okay to rest. Okay. So thank you again, everybody, and I wish you all to enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you, Pastor Kelly.